Hello and welcome to this session number 4 of our 5-session series, Word Processing for Academic Writing. In this session we're going to look at citations and bibliography and how they are managed within the document. Now, citations and bibliography are a very important part of any academic submission. Not only do they allow the reader to see the works that you have researched and read to assemble your document, but the inclusion of those in a list at the bottom of the document will therefore exclude you from suggestions of plagiarism within the document. Citations and bibliography use styles in order to select the content to be included in the list. Now, these are not formatting styles, but are particular citation and bibliography styles. And you can see I'm currently using the Harvard style, which is not readily available in Word but can be downloaded from a website and installed in the appropriate folders. But there is quite an extensive list here, and by referring to your style guide you will be able to find the appropriate system to use. So we'll stick with the Harvard one for the moment, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to the end of the document and insert a referencing and bibliography at the bottom of the document. So here we are at the bottom of the document and we're on page 5. Now again, this is going in at the current bottom of the document. As you add more text to your document, obviously the page that these references are on will change. So all I need to do now at this moment is choose the style that I want to use. So I have two here. I have bibliography or I've works cited. So if I select bibliography, I will get the word bibliography, and you will see there are no sources in the current document. So I'm just going to highlight bibliography, and by going to the Home tab I can check that that's using heading 1 style. So it means then that the table of contents that we made earlier will actually pick up on this. So I'll go back to the Reference tab now, and by going to the top of the document I can choose a point within the document where I want to insert a reference. So for example, at the end of this sentence I want to include a reference to someone or other, and at this point I can insert a citation, and by clicking on that there's no other references, so I'm going to add a new source. Now the Create Source dialog box opens up, and the type of source is a journal article. This can be any one of these options which are available, and it's quite an extensive list starting with book and working all the way down to miscellaneous. And if I choose book, the layout of this area which we need to fill in changes to suit that. So we'll go back to a journal article, and the author of the journal, you place in here the surname and the first initial. If there's more than one author, you can then use a semicolon, and that tells the word processor that you are actually using more than one individual. We'll leave it at 1 for the moment. The title that's going in here is the title of the article. We'll use word processing for academic writing as the title of the article. The journal that came from, so the name of the journal, the year in which the article was published in the journal, and the month in which it was published. Now, not all journals will have a monthly publication, so that can be left blank if necessary, but in this case we'll say that this was published in January, and you can see an example of how you would write that down there. So each one of these is giving you an example. Pages are the pages in the journal where that article can be found. So the example here is 50 to 62. We'll say ours was on page 10 to 15. The volume of the journal, now in this case it says Roman numerals 3, but you can actually put in whatever number. So we'll say it was volume number 5, and that would be, because it was January, would be issue number 1. And that is all I need for a journal article. There are other fields within there. If I need them I can show all bibliography fields, and you can see there's quite a lot in there, or I can just show the minimum. So if I now am happy with that, I can now set that citation source within the document, and you can see it's been given a coded name down here, the tag name, and that will show up in when we go to manage sources in a moment. So if I say OK to that, you can see that I have a citation placed at the current location. And if I click on that, I have a couple of tools available to me. I can move the citation by dragging it from place to place. So I've put it in the wrong place. I can move it down to here instead. I can use the drop down arrow to edit that citation. So if I click on that, it brings me in here and allows me, for example, to add page numbers. If I want to, I can suppress things like the author, the year, or the title as I see fit. So by suppressing any of these, it means that they will not show up in the citation, but they will show up in the bibliography. I can edit the source, which will bring me back to the form that I just filled in. So if I made any errors there, I can make changes to it in that area there. The final options on this is convert citation to static text. In other words, it doesn't become a control field, it becomes static text. And you might do that at the point where you're going to print or send it away for assessment, so that the citations cannot be moved around or interfered with. They just become standard text and they don't update. And then from this point, I can update citations or bibliography, or I can go to the actual bibliography, which we're going to do in a second, because I want you to see what actually happens down there. So instead of updating from there, I'm going to update it at the end of the document. So you can see here that again, there are no sources in the current document. So if I click on this area here, I now have, just like the table of contents, update citations and bibliography. So if I click on that, it will take a couple of seconds, and you will see that our journal article has now been placed within the document. And again, this is an opportunity for you to check that you are meeting the requirements of your style guide. For example, this is now currently in Harvard. If I go to APA 5th edition, you will see that the layout is slightly different in that one. And in each one of these, they all have their own specific way of laying out a document. So I'll just return that to Harvard for the moment. And you can see even within the Harvard, there's ones that have brackets around the date and there's ones that don't. So by working through your referencing style, you can actually come very close to, or in fact spot on to, your style guide. But I would recommend at the end of the process that you check that everything's in place. So I'm just going to go just directly above here, and at the end of this sentence, so we can see what's going on, I'm going to insert a new citation again. You can see the other one is already there. I'm going to add a new source, and we'll make this a book. And the author of this is a guy called Bradford. I'm going to give him an initial of James. And the book is called Writing for Academics. That book was written in 1996. Now the city is the city in which it was published. We'll say London. And the publisher was Gillan Macmillan. Now, this is a new citation that's gone into the document. And we're just going to say OK. And you'll see that my citation is in place, but once again my bibliography hasn't been updated. So I'm now going to update that, and the clever thing with citations and bibliographies is that despite the fact that the Bradford citation is further down the document than the Lyons one is, you will see that Bradford has gone in alphabetical order. So your bibliography will always be in alphabetical order. It won't references regarding to where it is in the document. It's purely a alphabetical list of citations. So with that in mind, you can add your citations as and when you need them. And by updating your bibliography, you will know that they will be in perfect alphabetical order for submission at the end of the process. Now I just want to go back into the subsection for a moment, and this notion of managing sources. So if I click on that, you will see that the current list is the list that's within this document. So there's the two citations that have gone into that document. And over here I have a rather long list of people that I've cited in various documents in the past. And this is where citing within Microsoft Word becomes very, very handy, because those lists are stored within the Microsoft Word folder. So long as you have the Word installed on your computer, you'll be able to access all these different citations and bibliographies. So for example, if I want to copy these two citations into that list, I can click on whichever ones I want and copy them across. Or conversely, I can pick one that I've already used, and I've looked at these guys before, and I want to now copy them into this document because I'm going to recite them in this document. So I'm going to take this one here, which has quite a lot of authors involved in that, and I'm going to copy that across to the current list. Once I've copied that across, I can edit it, or I can create a new source. I can do quite a lot from within here. But you'll notice that within this current list, that the first two citations actually have a check mark against them, and this third one doesn't. And basically what that means is that this read citation is on the current list, but it's not actually cited within the document. So I can close that, and I can choose a point where this citation needs to go in. So you'll now find when I go back to insert citations, this citation is available. So all I need to do is I don't need to fill in anything. I can just click on it, and you can see because it's multiple, it's put in read et al. And if I go to the bottom of where the bibliography is, and in the bibliography, if I update that, read has gone in its appropriate place, and instead of at all, it's actually named all the people that were involved in writing that document. So within the citations and bibliography, the main things you need to look at is when you're inserting the citations, either it's one that you already have on your list, or it's a new source. Once we're adding a new source, you can choose the type of source you want, and you can then fill in the appropriate details within the form that's presented to you there. And I'd recommend that you do that as soon as you get a reference, fill in the form and have the reference there on your list, apply it to the document as and when you need it. And to do that, you need to manage the sources, and that gives you this two-sided box, which allows you to look back at previous sources that you've used. You can then transfer those onto the current list or remove any item from your current list. And you can see for the moment I now have the three of them, and they all have a check mark. So in other words, they're in the document and they're in your bibliography. So by checking that list, you can see that anyone that's there that has not been checked needs to be included in your bibliography, and you can do that by updating. So for example, these three are now checked because they're within the document. If I close that and then I decide I'm going to remove, we say Bradford, I just click to the left of it and backspace, and on the second tab it disappears. Now he's still within the bibliography list. If I go to my managed sources, you'll see the check mark has gone. So I'm actually going to delete that one from the current list. So I close that document and I then update my citations. You will see that he's removed from your list. So as a final option, just before you finalize your document, you can check through this list and make sure that there's no one in there that doesn't have a check mark against them, because they will show up in your bibliography list, but they won't show up as cited in your document. So that is the citations and bibliography in a nutshell. It's not an overly complex process, but if you manage it as you go, you will find that it's very, very simple and straightforward to ensure that your citations and bibliography lists meet the requirements of your style guide. So the final step to this is we'll go back to our table of contents from the previous session, and if I update the table, update the entire table, you'll see that my bibliography is now available within my table of contents, and again I can control click and go directly to there. So now we have our table of contents and our bibliography and our formatting working for us and doing most of the work. You can get on, as I've said in the previous ones, with the serious part of actually writing the document and using these automated controls to get you to the standard that's required in your style document.